My name is Emma. I was 30 years old when this story happened, and I thought I had finally reached a place in life where everything made sense. I had a career I had fought tooth and nail to build. I had a boyfriend who shared my passion for classic cars, and I had one possession that was the crown jewel of my entire life, a rally red 1969 Corvette Stingray. That car was not just metal, rubber, and glass. It was the echo of every weekend I had spent in my grandfather's garage learning how to replace spark plugs instead of playing with dolls getting oil stains on my hands when other girls were painting their nails. To me, the Stingray was a promise, fulfilled a connection to the only man in my childhood who had looked me straight in the eye and said, "You can do this. You are strong enough." So imagine the feeling of stepping off a 13-hour flight from Tokyo. I was exhausted, jet-lagged, but vibrating with excitement. I had just sealed a $12 million contract for my firm, an achievement that could propel me into a vice president role. As my taxi turned onto the quiet suburban street where my parents lived, I messaged my boyfriend James 10 more minutes until I see her again. By her, I meant the Corvette. The driver pulled into my parents' driveway. My suitcase thumped on the curb as I looked toward the garage. The door was wide open. My dad's sedan was parked inside. My mom's SUV too. But the space where my Stingray should have been was empty. My breath caught. At first I thought maybe my dad had moved it. He liked to polish cars sometimes. Or maybe James had already come to switch it back since before leaving. I had arranged for him to swap his replica Stingray with mine for safety reasons. I dropped my luggage and stepped forward, peering into every corner of that garage, waiting for the familiar red curve to flash in the light. Nothing. The air seemed to thicken around me. My stomach twisted as I pushed open the front door. My mom appeared smiling too brightly, her eyes darting like she was hiding something. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight?" she asked. I didn't answer. My throat was tight. "Where is my car?" I asked. My voice was sharp, trembling at the edges. My dad looked up from his recliner, folding the newspaper too slowly, avoiding my eyes. He cleared his throat. My mom's smile hardened into something else, something almost smug. And then she said the words that shattered me. "Thanks to your car, Emma, your sister is having the time of her life." It took me a second to process. My sister Heather, the younger one who had always been treated like spun glass while I was left to tough it out. She was the reason my Corvette wasn't in that garage. I let out a short laugh, sharp, disbelieving. My mom snapped, her eyes flashing. "What's so funny?" What was funny? Nothing. What was terrifying was the realization blooming in my chest my parents had crossed a line I never thought they would cross. That car was more than just a possession. It was years of sacrifice. It was my independence. It was my grandfather's legacy. And in that moment, standing in their doorway, jet-lagged and stunned, I knew something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about a car. This was about betrayal by the very people who were supposed to protect me. My mother's words rang in my ears like an explosion. "Thanks to your car, your sister is having the time of her life." I could barely breathe. My dad shifted in his recliner, staring down at the newspaper as if the tiny print could shield him from what was coming. My hands trembled. My heart hammered. I demanded again, louder this time. "Where is my car?" My mom crossed her arms, her chin tilted upward with that familiar look of defiance. "You should be happy for Heather. She deserved this chance more than you needed that car. She is finally enjoying herself, Emma. She needed a break." Her words stabbed deeper than she realized. To her, my car was just an object. To me, it was 5 years of grinding 70-hour weeks. It was every night I skipped dinner with friends. It was the echo of my grandfather's garage and his steady hands guiding mine. My car was my soul on 4 wheels. and she had tossed it aside like junk at a yard sale. I laughed again, a broken, bitter sound. My dad's voice cracked as he tried to calm me. Now, Emma, don't get upset. Your sister's been under a lot of pressure at work. All her friends were going on this cruise. She was left out. You know how sensitive she is. We wanted her to feel included. So you sold my Corvette, I shouted, the walls of the house vibrating with my voice. You had no right, that car was mine. Don't be dramatic, my mom snapped. You have money. You can always buy another car. But your sister may never get another chance like this. Family matters more than possessions. That was the final twist of the knife, hearing her dismiss not only my car, but my feelings, my sacrifice, my boundaries. To her, Heather's temporary happiness outweighed my years of effort. I felt my chest tighten. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I remembered every childhood moment when Heather got the spotlight, and I was told to be strong, to understand, to wait. It was happening again, only this time they had taken the one thing I thought was safe from their favoritism. I forced myself to inhale, steadying my shaking hands. My dad tried again, his tone softer now. You can understand, can't you, Emma? You always have been the strong one. That phrase, the strong one, was their excuse. It had always been their excuse. It meant I didn't get the party, the new clothes, the support. It meant Heather's comfort was more important than my dignity. This wasn't strength. This was exploitation. I turned to my mom, my voice low but sharp as glass. You didn't just take a car. You stole a part of me. You sold years of my life, and you did it without blinking. Her lips pressed together. For the first time, she looked uncertain. But then she recovered, lifting her chin. Heather's your sister. You should be glad to help her. She's been struggling. I laughed again, hollow. Struggling. She works an entry-level job, yes. But did you ever once sell your jewelry or your car to make my life easier when I was working 3 jobs through college? No. You let me suffer, and now you've sold my dream for her vacation. The silence that followed was heavy. My dad swallowed hard. My mom looked away. The betrayal hung in the air, thick enough to choke on. I could feel the rage building, but underneath it was something even more dangerous: clarity. My parents had just revealed how little they valued me, how quick they were to sacrifice me for Heather's comfort. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this be brushed aside, not this time. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to pause here. If you've ever had family cross a boundary, take something that was yours because they believed they had the right, then you know this feeling. You know that cocktail of rage, betrayal, and grief. And if you're listening right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever been in my shoes? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because you'll want to hear how this plays out. Because what came next was only the beginning. I need to take you back before this betrayal makes full sense. Because to understand why that Corvette meant everything to me, you have to know where it all began. I was 7 years old when I first smelled motor oil mixed with sawdust on a Saturday morning. My grandfather's garage wasn't just a workshop, it was a sanctuary. He had an old pickup truck that rumbled like thunder when he turned the key, and he would come by my house early, honking twice a secret code just for me. I would grab my sneakers and run out, leaving cartoons behind, eager to spend the day with him. While other kids were glued to their televisions, I was learning to hold a wrench, replace spark plugs, and identify the subtle sound of an engine misfiring. My grandfather would grin, wiping grease from his hands, and call me Nessie, his nickname for me. Cars aren't just machines, he told me once, his eyes sparkling. They have souls. And if you listen carefully, you can hear them talk. There was one car that held me spellbound above all others. His prized possession, a 1969 Corvette Stingray in rally red. The curves shimmered like liquid fire. The engine purred like a big cat ready to spring. The first time I saw it, I whispered to myself, "Someday I'll own one just like this." That whisper wasn't a child's fantasy. It became a vow, a promise to my future self. My parents never understood. My mother wrinkled her nose whenever I came home with grease-stained hands. Why can't you be interested in ballet or painting something normal? My father would shake his head, half confused, half disappointed. But I didn't care. My grandfather cared. He saw me. And that was enough. Heather, my younger sister, was the opposite of me. Delicate, soft-spoken, praised for her feminine interests. Dance lessons at 6, designer clothes at 12, a lavish sweet 16 with 50 guests. She sparkled in the spotlight while I was told we couldn't afford shop classes, handed hand-me-downs, and reminded to be strong. I didn't resent Heather herself. I loved her in my own way. But the difference in how we were treated burned like acid. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone reminded me that she was the chosen one, the golden child. And I was the one expected to understand, to sacrifice, to endure. That Corvette became more than a dream. It was a rebellion. A statement that I wasn't invisible, that I could carve a life out of grit and stubbornness. My grandfather passed away before he could see me behind the wheel, but I know he would have smiled proud, knowing I kept my vow. So when I tell you my parents didn't just sell a car, you understand now. They sold my childhood promise. They sold the only thing that had connected me back to the man who gave me faith in myself. Sometimes I wonder if anyone listening has felt this way. That the one thing you built with your own hands, with your own sweat, was dismissed by others as disposable. Have you ever chased something no one believed in but you, and when you finally had it, someone tried to strip it away? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories too. Because mine wasn't just a car story, it was a fight for recognition, a fight for boundaries I thought my family would respect. But as I was about to find out, respect had never been part of their vocabulary when it came to me. The story of Heather and me has always been a story of imbalance. If I was oil and metal, she was silk and glass. If I was grit, she was grace. At least that's how my parents chose to see it. And from the time we were children, that imbalance carved deep cracks into our family dynamic. Heather was 4 years younger than me, and in my parents' eyes, that alone seemed to make her fragile. She wanted dance lessons at 6, and without hesitation, they enrolled her in the most expensive studio in town. I asked for auto shop classes at 12, but Mom waved her hand saying we can't afford extra activities this year. Strangely, money was never tight when it came to Heather. She got brand new dresses from boutique shops. I got clothes that were worn out by the time they reached me. She had a sweet 16 party with music lights and 50 guests. I had a cake at the kitchen table and a card. For her high school graduation, she received a shiny new car with a ribbon on top. For mine, I got application fee waivers and a lecture about student loans. And every time the same explanation came. Emma, you're strong. You don't need all that fuss. Heather's sensitive. We have to take care of her. That phrase haunted me. You're strong. What it really meant was, you don't matter as much. My needs could be ignored because they believed I could endure. Their golden child needed to be cushioned. Their scapegoat needed to toughen up. Did I love Heather? Yes. I never blamed her for being adored. But I could never shake the sting of being second choice in my own family. That car, the Corvette Stingray, was the only thing that felt like mine, untouched by their favoritism. It was proof I had built something on my own. Through college, the contrast sharpened. I worked 3 jobs, studied finance, and kept a perfect grade point average. I skipped vacations, wore the same coat for 4 winters, and lived off cafeteria food. Heather, meanwhile, floated through with designer handbags my parents surprised her with. She always looked effortless, like the world bent around her. But here's the thing. Every sacrifice I made was fuel. Every disappointment drove me harder. By the time I graduated, I had learned not just how to survive, but how to win. Landing a position at a prestigious investment bank in Chicago felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. The hours were brutal, 70 hours a week, sometimes more, but I didn't care. Every dollar went straight into savings. When colleagues splurged on expensive dinners or trips, I kept my eyes on the goal. I didn't want luxury. I wanted the Corvette, my grandfather's Corvette, or one just like it. It was the fire that kept me moving through endless spreadsheets and midnight deadlines. And one day, after 5 years of relentless work, I found her. A rally red 1969 Corvette Stingray, listed by a collector in Wisconsin downsizing his collection. The price tag was $85,000, every penny I had saved. I signed the papers, hands shaking, and when I drove it home, I cried the entire way. I whispered into the air, "We did it, Grandpa." For once, the imbalance of my family didn't matter. I had built this dream with my own sweat. That's why when I saw the empty garage, it wasn't just theft. It was a repeat of every childhood slight magnified 1,000 times. It was my parents telling me again, Heather matters more. And this time I wasn't a little girl at the kitchen table. This time I was grown, and I was ready to fight back. The Corvette wasn't just a dream fulfilled. It was the purest reflection of my independence. I had lived frugally for years, sharing cramped apartments, packing simple lunches, skipping vacations, because I knew what I was working toward. Every long night under the fluorescent lights of the bank, every deal I closed, every hour I sacrificed, was for that car. When I finally slid behind the wheel, the leather hugging me tight, I felt unstoppable. The rally red shimmered in the sun as if it carried fire in its veins. I drove it home with tears streaking down my cheeks, whispering to my grandfather's memory, "We made it." It wasn't about status. It wasn't about showing off. It was proof. Proof that no matter how much my parents favored Heather, no matter how many times I was overlooked, I could still build something extraordinary. This Corvette wasn't just a purchase, it was my rebellion against years of being told to settle for less. I guarded that car like treasure. I drove it only on perfect weather days, kept it sheltered in storage during Chicago's brutal winters, and spent weekends polishing every curve until it gleamed like liquid ruby. James, my boyfriend, understood. He owned a replica Stingray himself, and together we went to car shows trading stories with other enthusiasts. For once I had someone who got it, someone who saw why this car was my lifeline. But my parents, they never asked why the Corvette mattered. They only saw the price tag. To them, it was extravagance, vanity, something a strong daughter could afford to lose. And that perspective was about to cost us everything. When my boss Veronica called me into her office one Tuesday afternoon, I feared the worst. Instead, she told me I was being sent to Tokyo to lead a presentation for Patterson Financial, a contract worth $12 million. It was the chance of a lifetime. My career was about to explode forward. Yet even as excitement surged through me, I thought of the Corvette. Chicago had been plagued by break-ins, and 3 weeks away was too long to leave her unprotected. That's when I decided better to keep it at my parents' quiet suburban home in Glenview. I drove over that evening. My dad admired the car, saying softly, "Your grandfather would be proud." It almost made me trust them. I explained carefully, start the car once a week, let it run 15 minutes, but don't drive it. Use the custom cover. Do not under any circumstance let anyone else touch it. Dad nodded, though his pride bristled at my instructions. "I'll treat it like gold," he said. At dinner, Heather joined us, complaining about how unfair life was. Her friends were going on a Mediterranean cruise, but she couldn't afford it. My mother's eyes filled with sympathy. My father mumbled something about money being tight with the kitchen renovation. I bit my tongue, listening to Heather sigh dramatically while I remembered every double shift I had pulled to pay for textbooks. Later that night, James and I finalized our backup plan. Because deep down, I didn't trust my parents. We decided to swap cars. My Corvette would stay in his climate-controlled garage, while his replica would sit safely at my parents' house. To the untrained eye, they looked identical. Only we knew the truth. When my flight took off for Tokyo, I felt relief. My career was about to soar, and my Corvette, my soul on four wheels, was safe. Or so I thought. And here's the thing. People say family is the safest place. But sometimes it's the one place you should never let your guard down. If you've ever sacrificed years for something precious, whether it was a career, a relationship, or a dream, only to feel like others treated it as disposable, you understand this ache. Hit that subscribe button because the storm was only beginning and you'll want to see how it all unfolds. Tokyo was everything I had dreamed of. Towering skyscrapers, neon lights pulsing against midnight skies, the sharp contrast between ancient temples and the rush of modern life. But I barely had time to breathe it all in. My schedule was a blur of meetings, presentations, and late-night strategy calls. Still, every night when I collapsed onto the hotel bed, my thoughts drifted back to the Corvette. I called my parents regularly. Each time Dad assured me everything was fine. Started the car today, ran like a charm. His voice always carried that casual confidence that should have comforted me but somehow didn't. Mom chimed in too, though her tone grew stranger near the end of my trip. One evening she sent a text. "We have a big surprise waiting for you when you get home." I stared at the screen confused. A surprise. I assumed it was a welcome home dinner, maybe a small celebration for the Tokyo success. I had no idea how twisted that surprise would turn out to be, because the Tokyo trip itself had been a triumph. Patterson Financial signed with us in the second week, locking in $12 million for the firm. Veronica, my boss, hinted about a promotion, even letting the words vice president slip with a smile. I was on top of the world. I imagined flying back, slipping behind the wheel of my Corvette, and cruising down Lake Michigan with the wind in my hair, a victory lap for everything I had sacrificed. The 13-hour flight home was filled with daydreams. My phone buzzed as I landed at O'Hare James, reminding me he was meeting me at my parents' house to swap our cars back. Relief warmed me. Soon the Stingray would be mine again. But as the taxi pulled into my parents' driveway, excitement soured into unease. The garage door was open. My dad's sedan sat inside, my mom's SUV too. But the Corvette replica or not was gone. I dragged my suitcase across the driveway, pulse quickening. Maybe they moved it, I thought. Maybe James had already picked it up. But when my mom opened the front door, the look on her face told me the truth. Her smile was stretched too thin, her eyes too bright. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight?" "Where is my car?" My voice cut like ice. She avoided my gaze, ushering me inside. Dad folded his newspaper too slowly, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. "Something came up while you were gone," he began, his voice unnaturally high. I dropped my bag, my chest tightening. What does that mean? Where is my Corvette? And then my mom's mask slipped. Her chin lifted, her lips curled into something closer to a sneer than a smile. "Heather needed some help," she said firmly. "A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life." She held up her phone, scrolling through Heather's Instagram. My sister was grinning on the deck of a Mediterranean cruise ship, cocktail in hand designer sunglasses on her face, looking carefree and glowing. The pieces fell together in a horrifying snap. They had sold my car. I couldn't breathe. My knees nearly buckled. After years of sacrifice, they had ripped away the one thing that belonged to me and handed it to Heather like another trinket from a store shelf. This wasn't a surprise. It was a betrayal so deep it cut straight through my bones. And for the first time in my life, I knew there was no going back to the way things were. Tell me this: have you ever trusted family with something precious, only to realize they valued it less than strangers would? Drop your thoughts below. Because that moment when I saw Heather's smiling face on that cruise ship, it was the beginning of a storm that would change everything. I stared at Heather's photos until the phone blurred in my vision. The Mediterranean sunset behind her, the sparkling blue water, the golden drink raised in her hand like a trophy. And all I could think was my car, my grandfather's legacy, my years of work, reduced to a cocktail and a vacation smile. The words scraped from my throat. You sold my car? It wasn't even a question. It was disbelief wrapped in fury. Dad cleared his throat, trying for his calm, reasonable tone, the one he always used when smoothing over Heather's mistakes. Emma, listen, your sister was having such a hard time. She needed this cruise. All her friends were going. If she'd been left out, it would have crushed her. Crushed her, I repeated, my voice climbing. Do you know what crushed me? Working 70-hour weeks for 5 years, saving every single dime while you bought her designer clothes and new cars. Do you know what crushed me? That you thought her feeling left out was worth more than my entire dream? Mom's face hardened. Stop being so dramatic. It's just a car. You make good money. You can buy another one. But Heather, she needed this opportunity. The room spun. I pressed my palms into the arm of the couch, grounding myself before I screamed. Just a car. That Corvette was the only thing in my life they couldn't take credit for. The only thing that was mine, not given, not borrowed, not dismissed. It was proof I had carved a place for myself outside their shadow. And they had sold it cheaply, too. When I demanded to know how much, Dad muttered the number. 50,000. My jaw dropped. 50,000. That car was worth 85. Did you even research? Did you even try? We needed to move quickly, he mumbled, his eyes darting away, before you came home. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. They had rushed the sale, knowing I'd fight back if I found out. They had betrayed me, eyes wide open. I stood, my body trembling. You had no right. That car was mine, registered under my name. You forged documents, didn't you? You lied. Dad's voice cracked. We told the buyer you'd authorized us. I laughed, sharp, humorless. So you committed fraud. Do you realize that? Mom scoffed, waving her hand. Enough. Family matters more than things. Heather is your sister. She needed this. And I don't matter at all, do I? My voice sliced through the air. Not my boundaries, not my feelings, not my property. You've always been so materialistic, Mom snapped, focused on things. Heather's mental health was at risk. She was depressed. Depressed, I spat back. Since when? Because her boss gives her deadlines. Welcome to adult life. The silence afterward was deafening. My dad rubbed his temple. My mom crossed her arms, lips tight. For years they'd dismissed me with that one phrase, you're strong. But this time my strength wasn't going to excuse their betrayal. I could feel something shift inside me, solidifying. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was resolve. Let me ask you, if your parents sold the one thing you built with your own blood and sweat, would you ever forgive them? Or would you fight back, no matter the cost? Drop your answer in the comments, because in that moment, I knew my fight had only just begun. My voice was still echoing in the living room when I felt my whole body trembling. Rage and disbelief battled inside me. I kept replaying my mother's words. It's just a car, like a broken record. She didn't understand. She never had. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. Do you two even realize what you've done? That Corvette wasn't just transportation. It was 5 years of sacrifice. It was my connection to Grandpa. It was the promise I made when I was 7 years old. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. And you sold it for a vacation cocktail on some ship. Dad tried his usual soothing tone. Emma, please. We did this for your sister. She's been struggling with depression. She needed this escape. Struggling with depression, I barked out a harsh laugh. So you fix that by committing fraud and selling my property. Why not sell your own car? Dad, why not pawn your jewelry? Mom, why was it always me who had to pay the price? For a moment, neither of them answered. The silence was more honest than their excuses had ever been. They knew I was right. But my mother straightened her back, her lips curling in defiance. Because you can handle it. You've always been strong. Heather. She's fragile. There it was, the old refrain. The double standard that had shadowed my entire life. I had grown up hearing it, but this time it hit different. This wasn't about clothes or parties. This was about erasing years of my work, years of my life. Strong doesn't mean disposable, I said quietly. My words hung in the air like thunder. I'm done being the one who sacrifices so Heather can float through life. Mom narrowed her eyes. Don't talk like that. Family means giving. No, I snapped back. Family means respect, and you've shown me none. My heart pounded. I was standing at the edge of something dangerous. The fury inside me was like a storm, but beneath it was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't going to swallow it down. I wasn't going to let their favoritism roll over me like it always had. And just when the tension was at its highest, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from James, I'm outside. Where's the Stingray? My eyes widened. The timing felt surreal. My parents looked up at me, confusion flickering across their faces. I started to laugh, not because it was funny, but because the irony was too sharp. The kind of laugh that shakes loose from your chest when rage and relief collide. What's so funny? Mom demanded. I stood, the weight of the storm inside me shifting into resolve. You think you sold my Corvette? I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. You didn't. Their brows furrowed, trying to catch up. My dad stammered. What do you mean? We saw you park it here before your trip. I turned toward the door, my lips curling into a bitter smile. You sold the wrong car. The look on their faces was priceless fear, confusion, disbelief all twisting together. And in that moment, I knew the power had shifted. Because the betrayal they thought they'd committed against me was about to unravel into something far worse for them. Have you ever had a moment where clarity cuts through anger, where suddenly you see exactly how you'll turn the tables? Comment if you felt that shift, because that realization in me was the spark that changed everything. I opened the front door, and there was James standing in the driveway with confusion written all over his face. He looked past me, expecting to see the Stingray, but of course the garage was empty. Emma, he said slowly, where is it? I motioned him inside, my parents stiffening as he stepped over the threshold. My mom plastered on a fake smile, but her eyes betrayed panic. My dad shifted uncomfortably, as if hoping James's presence would somehow soften the blow. Mom, Dad, you remember James, I said. My voice was calm now, too calm. The storm inside me had settled into razor-sharp focus. My mom waved impatiently. Of course we know James. But what does that matter? We're talking about your car. That's just it, I replied. You didn't sell my car. You sold his. For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the room. Then both of their faces drained of color. James crossed his arms, his jaw tight. That Corvette you sold, that wasn't Emma's. That was my replica, built in 2004, worth maybe $30,000, not $85. Dad blinked, stuttering. But it looked the same. You drove it here before you left. That was the point, James said coldly, to protect Emma's actual Stingray. Hers has been in my climate-controlled garage this whole time, safe, untouched. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, "Oh my God, what have we done?" I stepped closer, my voice cutting. You forged documents. You lied to the buyer. You sold property that didn't belong to you. That isn't just wrong. That's fraud. That's theft. Dad's face went ashen. We could go to jail. James didn't flinch. Grand theft auto over $20,000 is a felony in Illinois. Add wire fraud if the payment went through electronically. That's up to 15 years, each. My mom started to sob, dramatic and loud, as if tears could wash away the reality. Once I might have rushed to comfort her. Not this time, not after everything. You tricked us, she wailed. You switched the cars without telling us. How could you? I narrowed my eyes. No, I protected what was mine because deep down I knew you couldn't be trusted. And look, you proved me right. My dad looked at James desperately. What do you want us to do? James's voice was ice. First, I want to know exactly who has my car and how much they paid. Then we'll figure out how you're going to fix this, because you're not walking away without consequences. The room was suffocating with fear. My parents had thought they could get away with betraying me again, just like they always had. But now the tables had turned. This time they weren't just guilty of hurting me, they were guilty of a crime. And the best part, I had the power to decide what happened next. This was the moment everything shifted. The betrayal was no longer mine to carry. It was theirs to answer for. And if you've ever dreamed of turning the tables on people who underestimated you, hit that subscribe button, because what came next was a reckoning they never saw coming. My parents looked like statues carved from fear. My dad's knuckles whitened as he gripped the arm of his chair. My mom's tears streaked her cheeks, but even in that messy display, I could still see the flicker of entitlement in her eyes. As if somewhere deep down, she still believed she had done nothing wrong. The silence was broken by my phone buzzing again. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Emma Miller?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette Stingray from your parents. The title transfer seems to have a problem. Could you clarify a few things?" My eyes locked on my parents, their faces drained of what little color was left. In that single moment, they looked small cornered animals who finally realized the cage door had swung shut. "I'll call you back within the hour, Mr. Donovan," I said evenly. "There's been a misunderstanding." I hung up and let the silence stretch. Finally I spoke. "That was your buyer. He's already noticing the paperwork doesn't match. Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Mom clutched her chest. "Emma, please. You can't let this man go to the police. You have to help us." I almost laughed. Help them. They hadn't spared a thought for me when they stole James's car. But now, facing exposure, suddenly they wanted my protection. James stepped forward, his tone sharp. "Ignorance isn't a defense. You forged signatures. You fabricated a bill of sale with a fake VIN number. That's multiple felonies. The only question is whether Emma and I press charges or whether you make this right immediately." Dad's voice shook. "We'll do anything. Just tell us what we need to do." I crossed my arms. "For once, you're going to clean up your own mess. You're going to call Donovan, admit what you did, and return every penny, plus damages." Mom gasped. $55,000. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? James's jaw tightened. "That's not our problem. You wanted to play games with property that wasn't yours. Now you get to pay." For the first time, I saw my father truly break. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of years of favoritism and excuses had finally crushed him. "We'll find a way. Home equity, loan, jewelry, whatever it takes." The irony was almost unbearable. They had dismissed my car as just a thing, but now they were about to learn what it felt like to bleed for something you didn't want to lose. And here's the raw truth. I wasn't sure if I wanted them to go to prison or just suffer long enough to understand. What about you? If it were your parents, if they had stolen and sold something precious, would you press charges even if it meant watching them in handcuffs? Or would you give them one last chance to make it right? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know what you'd do. As for me standing in that living room, I knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. After that call, the house turned into a storm of panic. My mother paced the room, wringing her hands. My father fumbled with his phone, scrolling through contacts as if the buyer's information might somehow erase what they had done. But nothing could erase it. The truth was written in ink, forged on documents sitting in Donovan's hands. James and I stepped outside for a moment, needing air. The driveway felt strangely empty without the Corvette gleaming under the sun. James rubbed his temples. I can't believe this. Your own parents. They crossed every line. I knotted my throat tight. They've always favored Heather. I just never thought they'd go this far. He looked at me carefully. Do you want to press charges because we could, and we'd win? The words hit me like a blow. Did I want them to go to prison for years they had dismissed me, diminished me stolen moments that were mine? And now they had tried to sell off my soul on 4 wheels. Every part of me screamed for justice, but another part of me, the part still tethered by blood, hesitated. I don't know, I admitted, voice low. I don't want them to walk away like nothing happened. But the thought of them in handcuffs makes me sick. James reached for my hand. His grip was steady, grounding. Then we find another way. They need to pay. They need to understand. But maybe there's more than one kind of justice. We went back inside. My parents were huddled together, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. Dad finally spoke, his voice cracking. We'll make this right. We'll take out a loan. We'll pay Donovan back. Just don't turn us in. I studied them, every wrinkle of fear on their faces. For the first time, I realized they weren't invincible. They weren't untouchable. They were just people, flawed, selfish people who had built a house of favoritism so fragile it had finally crumbled. Mom whispered through her tears, "Please, Emma, please don't destroy this family." I almost laughed. They had destroyed it the moment they chose Heather's cruise over my life's work. But I bit back the words. Instead, I said, "It's not up to me anymore. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from James. He's the one you'll have to face now." They turned to him, eyes wide with fear. My father asked, "What do you want from us?" James's voice was steady as stone. "I want the buyer's full information. I want every dollar back. And I want a notarized apology acknowledging what you did, because next time there won't be a second chance." The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents nodded slowly like prisoners awaiting their sentence. And for the first time in my life, I felt the power shift. They weren't the ones dictating anymore. I was. But the next 24 hours blurred into chaos. My parents scrambled, whispering frantically in the kitchen, while James and I sat at the dining table reviewing the forged paperwork they had handed over. It was worse than I expected. Not only had they signed my name on the bill of sale, but they had also listed a fake VIN number that didn't even match James's replica. Every page reeked of desperation. James shook his head. "This isn't just sloppy. This is criminal. If Donovan takes this to the authorities, your parents are finished." I looked at the stack of papers, bile rising in my throat. My parents had always believed rules bent around them when it came to Heather. But this wasn't favoritism anymore. This was felony territory. That night, I barely slept. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from my mother, pleading, apologizing, sometimes blaming me. By dawn, I knew I needed outside counsel. So James and I met Alicia Ramirez, a lawyer friend who specialized in criminal law. Sitting in her sleek office downtown, I laid out the entire story. Alicia listened carefully, then leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp. "Let me be very clear. What your parents did constitutes grand theft, auto, and wire fraud. Each carries up to 15 years. Given their age and clean record, they might get something lighter, but prison is definitely on the table." The words hit like cold steel. My parents in prison. The image churned my stomach, but Alicia didn't flinch. "You have options. Press charges and let the legal system handle it. Pursue civil remedies, or settle privately with a restitution agreement. But whatever you do, act quickly. The longer Donovan sits with that fraudulent car, the more likely he goes to the police himself. James leaned forward. If we try to settle privately, what's required? Restitution in full. Donovan gets his money back, plus compensation for the trouble. And your parents sign a legally binding apology acknowledging their actions. Without that, this could explode. I nodded slowly, though my chest felt like it was caving in. My parents had created this disaster, but now the cleanup fell into my lap. On the drive back, James asked gently, "What do you want to do?" I stared out the window, watching the city blur past. I don't want them in prison. But I don't want them to think they got away with it either. They need to pay. In money, yes, but more than that, they need to admit what they've done. When we got home, my parents were waiting outside my apartment building looking haggard. My dad's voice cracked the moment I opened the door. "Emma, we'll do whatever you say. Just, please don't let us go to jail." I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered Heather on that cruise ship smiling with my stolen sacrifice funding her designer sunglasses. Any pity hardened into resolve. "You'll repay Donovan," I said flatly. 55,000 immediately. Loan jewelry, whatever it takes. And you'll sign an apology notarized promising never to cross these boundaries again. Mom gasped. "A notarized document? That's extreme." James cut her off. "Not as extreme as 15 years behind bars. Take the deal." Their faces told me everything. For the first time, they realized there was no escape route. Let me pause here. Imagine this: your own parents forging documents, selling stolen property, and begging you to save them. Would you give them mercy, or would you let them face prison? Tell me in the comments, because this was the moment I had to decide what kind of daughter I wanted to be. And the choice I made would set everything else in motion. The following days felt like living inside a courtroom, even though no judge had spoken yet. My parents were forced to confront the wreckage they had created, and for the first time there was no easy excuse, no way to cover it up with Heather's fragility or my supposed strength. They scrambled to piece together the money. Dad met with the bank to arrange a home equity loan for $40,000. Mom reluctantly took her diamond rings and gold bracelets to a consignment shop. Heather, who had just returned from her luxury cruise tanned and glowing, was told she had to contribute $10,000 from her savings. Watching her face fall when she realized the vacation wasn't free after all was almost satisfying. But Heather didn't give in quietly. At the family meeting I insisted on holding, she lashed out. "Why am I being punished? I didn't sell the car. I didn't forge papers." I leaned across the table, my voice firm but calm. "No, you manipulated them. You knew you couldn't afford that trip. You cried about how unfair life was, how depressed you were, and they handed you my dream on a silver platter. You may not have signed the papers, Heather, but you lit the fire." Her eyes flashed. "You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. Mom and Dad love me more, and you can't stand it." The room went silent. Even my parents looked stunned at her bluntness. But instead of anger, I felt something close to pity. "You think that's love?" I asked softly. "That they shield you from every hardship, hand you whatever you want, and never let you grow up? That's not love, Heather. That's enabling. And it's why you can't stand on your own 2 feet." For once, Dad spoke up, not to defend her, but to admit his guilt. "Vanessa's right." His voice was low, weary. "We thought we were protecting you, Heather, but we crippled you instead." That moment was a crack in the armor of denial my family had worn for decades. For hours we sat in that room crying, arguing, confessing truths we had buried under years of favoritism and silence. It was raw, it was ugly, but it was real. In the end, we reached an agreement. Donovan would receive $55,050 back for the fraudulent sale, $5,000 for damages. My parents would sign a notarized apology drafted by our lawyer, Alicia, acknowledging every crime and every betrayal. James insisted on it, and I agreed. Without that document, this cycle would never break. Mom resisted at first, calling it humiliating, but James didn't budge. Not as humiliating as a prison sentence, he said. She signed. And for the first time, I felt the balance of power shift. My parents weren't untouchable anymore. Heather wasn't their porcelain doll. And I wasn't the strong one they could exploit endlessly. If you've ever had to force your family to face consequences, if you've ever demanded accountability where none had ever existed before, then you know how liberating that feels. Subscribe if you want to hear how this settlement unfolded, because the reckoning wasn't over yet. The settlement didn't magically heal the wounds, but it forced open doors we had all kept locked for years. Once the money was arranged and Donovan agreed to return James's replica, the four of us sat in my apartment facing truths no one wanted to admit out loud. Heather was the first to crack. Her voice wavered between anger and tears. It's not fair. I didn't ask them to sell anything. I just wanted one good thing for myself. I stared at her, tired but steady. Heather, you're 24. You've had good things your entire life. Dance lessons, designer clothes, a brand new car at graduation, while I worked 3 jobs and walked home in the snow with holes in my shoes. Do you know how many times I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, but I didn't. I just kept going. She shrank under the words. For once, Mom didn't swoop in to shield her. Instead, she covered her face with her hands, whispering, "What have we done?" Dad cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with something I rarely heard: regret. We thought we were protecting Heather, but all we did was teach her that the world would bend for her, and that you, he looked at me, eyes damp, would bend too. Because you were strong. Because we counted on you to endure. And that was wrong. For a moment the room was silent except for Heather's quiet sniffles. It was the first time I had ever heard my father admit he had failed me, and it pierced deeper than anger ever could. We didn't leave it there. James urged us to talk, really talk. Hours passed as truths tumbled out. Heather admitted she had always sensed the favoritism, but clung to it anyway, afraid she wouldn't measure up without it. My mom confessed that she equated fragility with love, believing she was nurturing Heather by cushioning every fall. I spoke too, telling them how every dismissal had carved into me. How "you're strong" had felt like a life sentence, excusing them from caring about my needs. By the time the words ran out, we were all raw, like wounds freshly exposed to air. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first real honesty we had ever shared. The following week, life shifted in small but telling ways. Heather started a new job at an advertising agency, this time without her parents pulling strings. She showed up on time, worked late, and for the first time didn't complain. My dad picked up extra construction shifts on weekends to help cover the loan. Mom's manicured nails were bare, her jewelry sold to fund restitution. Every little change was a reminder actions have consequences. And maybe, just maybe, we were beginning to learn that lesson together. 1 month later, I found myself back at my parents' dining room table. The same table where so many arguments had exploded, where favoritism had reigned for years. But that night, the atmosphere felt different. There was tension, yes, but also something softer, an uneasy hope. Dad carried in a platter of grilled chicken. His hands were rougher than I remembered, the calluses from his weekend construction shifts still visible. He set the dish down with a quiet pride, like a man trying to rebuild more than just finances. Mom followed with a bowl of salad. Her diamond rings were gone, her nails trimmed short, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. James sat beside me, invited as an act of goodwill. He had hesitated at first, but I encouraged him. "They need to see us as a unit," I whispered, "to understand that hurting you means hurting me." He agreed, though his eyes stayed watchful. Heather was late as usual, texting that traffic had slowed her down. But when she finally walked in, something about her was different. She wore business attire instead of the flashy outfits my parents used to shower her with. Her hair, no longer bleached and styled for attention, had grown back to its natural brown. She carried herself with a seriousness I'd never seen before. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting her bag down. The client meeting ran long. The words caught me off guard. This was Heather, the girl who once cried because her latte had too much foam. Now she was talking about clients, work, responsibility. As we ate, the conversation flowed cautiously, at first weather, neighborhood, news, safe topics. But then Dad cleared his throat. "I spoke to Uncle George," he said. "He's thinking of selling his old pickup. I was considering buying it, maybe fixing it up, with you." For a moment I couldn't speak. My father, the man who once shook his head at my grease-stained fingers, was asking to work on a truck with me. It wasn't just about the vehicle. It was about connection. About finally stepping into my world instead of dismissing it. "I'd like that," I said softly, and I meant it. Mom surprised me too. After dinner, she handed James a framed document. Inside was the notarized apology they had signed, the one we had demanded. "I had it framed," she said. "Not just for you, but as a reminder to myself. Boundaries matter. I'm still learning, but I want to do better." James nodded, his voice steady. "Thank you, Diana. I appreciate that." Heather chimed in later, asking me about my promotion in Tokyo. For once, there was no edge in her tone, no competition, just genuine curiosity. "Vice President of International Accounts," she repeated, smiling. "That's incredible. I'm proud of you, Emma." I studied her, searching for the old entitlement, but it wasn't there. Maybe the cracks had finally let some light in. As the night wound down, I realized something profound. The Corvette. My dream car was still mine, safe and gleaming in James's garage. But it had become more than just a symbol of independence. It had been the catalyst for change. It forced my family to confront truths we had all ignored. Painful truths. Necessary truths. When James and I drove home, the rumble of the engine beneath us was comforting. He glanced at me. "Do you regret how it all played out?" I thought about it carefully. No. It would have been easier to let them off the hook to avoid conflict. But if I had, nothing would have changed. They needed to face consequences, and I needed to stand firm in my boundaries. The sun dipped low over Lake Michigan as we pulled into the city, and for the first time in years I felt peace. Because standing up for yourself doesn't mean abandoning those you love. It means teaching them how to respect you. It means setting boundaries so that love has space to grow. And maybe that's the real lesson. Family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself endlessly. Family means respect, accountability, and change. If you've ever had to fight for that in your own life, subscribe and stay with me, because this story isn't just mine. It might be yours too. The road after the storm was never meant to be perfect. Old wounds don't close overnight, and trust doesn't rebuild with a single dinner or a signed document. But looking back, I've realized something powerful. Sometimes it takes losing what you thought you could never live without to finally see the truth about the people closest to you. For me, that truth was simple: love without respect isn't love at all. Family without boundaries is just control dressed up as care. My parents had spent years telling me I was strong enough to endure, but strength without acknowledgement feels like abandonment. The Corvette was never just a car. It was my declaration that I mattered, that my sacrifices were worth something. And when they tried to take that from me, I had no choice but to draw the line. The surprising part, that line didn't destroy us, it reshaped us. My father learning to meet me in my world, my mother acknowledging her favoritism, my sister finally standing on her own. These were small steps, but they were steps forward. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for, that even through betrayal and anger, there's still room for growth if we demand it. When I drive the Corvette now along Lake Michigan, I no longer see just chrome and horsepower. I see resilience. I see the little girl in her grandfather's garage making a promise to herself. And I see a woman who kept that promise not just by buying the car, but by refusing to let anyone family or not diminish her worth again. Maybe that's the lesson I want to leave you with. Protecting your boundaries isn't selfish. It's how real love begins. Ike.